Then we'll reassess. Do a psych eval. Burke gave him that hard-eyed stare that had earned him a nickname no one said to his face. I suggest you use the time wisely. A little counseling wouldn't be out of order. We got people for that. He shuffled some papers and rolled back from his desk. Effective immediately, Jennings. There was so much Wyatt wanted to say, was desperate to say, but the academy had trained him better. Like it or not, he was on a 4-week leave, and even then he wasn't guaranteed re-entry. A psychiatric evaluation. The thought brought bile into his esophagus. But then he'd be called up. Wyatt would finally get what he'd been working so hard for. In the meantime, where he'd go or what he'd do, Wyatt had no idea. He'd been training for the service one way or another since he'd studied criminal justice at Northeastern. Before that even, in high school, Hargrave Military Academy. He couldn't even remember who Wyatt Jennings was outside of the service. But he was about to find out. You're dismissed, Jennings. Burke frowned at him. He'd zoned out again. Wyatt rose to his feet with reluctance and said the only thing he could. Yes, sir. The familiar road twisted and turned around the Blue Ridge Mountains, following the shoreline of Bluebell Lake. Sunlight flashed on the water's surface, making Wyatt squint behind his sunglasses. It had only taken 24 hours to realize he'd better tackle this problem like a foreign threat to one of his protectees. The Secret Service was all he had, all he wanted, so he'd better get his act together, and quick. A few nights' sleep would be helpful, but the nightmares had been relentless. Since he wasn't one to spill his guts to a stranger, he'd packed a bag, hopped in his Audi, and pointed it toward the place where his problems had begun. Probably should have booked a hotel, if there was such a thing around here. But it was September, off-season, so he should be all right. The road curved to the left, and he passed the sign for the state park. Back in the early 90s, his father had set aside this piece of land. Before this place had been spoiled for him, Wyatt had fond memories of hiking and camping in those woods, thick with evergreen trees and night sounds. Bluebell had always felt more like home than Raleigh had. After a few more curves, he emerged from the mountains and into the town proper. Bluebell hadn't changed much. Someone had turned the fire station into a coffee house, and a few stores had sprouted up. He had fond memories of walking these streets, making ice cream runs to the dairy bar, fishing off the pier in Polly Park with his dad. He didn't remember the colorful canopies or the tidy row of trees lining the streets, but he'd only been 12 his last summer here. His respiration grew quick and shallow at the thought of that summer, his mouth going dry. He wiped a palm down the leg of his jeans. Out of habit, he pushed back the memory. But he would have to stop doing that. It wasn't working anymore, not since the shooting. It was as if everything he pushed down during the day bubbled to the surface as soon as sleep left him unguarded and vulnerable. His phone buzzed with a call. Ethan. He took it on his Bluetooth. Hey, what's up, man? You left Charlotte? You're on leave? What happened? Wasn't my choice, believe me. Burke called me into his office yesterday. And I have to hear about this from Drewski? Ethan had been Wyatt's best friend since they'd gone through 28 weeks of intense training. You didn't make it through that hellish experience without forming lifelong bonds. Sorry, should have called. Wyatt progressed through town. He almost mentioned the promotion, then held back for some reason. How'd your last assignment go? Ethan had a temporary assignment protecting the Pope during his stateside visit. Uneventful. You doing all right? I hate to tell you, but word around the office is you're losing it. Just a little trouble sleeping is all. I think I need to take a break from my routines. Chill out. I'll get it settled and be back before you know it. Ethan knew better than to suggest sleep aids. Men who were trained to be on constant alert weren't about to render themselves helpless. At least Wyatt wasn't. Where'd you go? Not far. A little lake town called Bluebell, tucked away in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Sounds